Last year I posted a review of the album The Hypnagogue by the band The Church, and in that review I offered what was, in retrospect, fairly measured praise. I was balancing two competing ideas, right? The idea that, on the one hand, I really liked the album, thought it was well crafted, and on the other, I wasn't crazy about the idea that The Church was now Steve Kilbey plus whoever was available and happened to want to be The Church. Now, it does seem like he and the current lineup have some unique personal chemistry, musical chemistry, really enjoy being in a band together, right? It's not at all fair to perceive it as the Fall-style revolving door situation. But I was reluctant to put it on the same plane as the classic lineup that spent decades developing a unique sound and connection while also maintaining some level of simmering personal dislike. They've since released a companion album of songs from the same session, set in the same conceptual universe, perhaps somewhat awkwardly titled Eros Zeta and the Perfumed Guitars. Now, this was somewhat controversially initially only sold at shows on the American tour. As of March 29, it is now available in wide release. So today I wanted to talk about how this album has felt to me as a longtime fan. When I first got into The Church over a decade ago, and for about 5 or 6 years thereafter, their music, every era of it, right? All the different albums, the B-sides, the acoustic albums, the secondary albums made of outtakes from the session for a main album. Somehow the whole great mass of it was this wonderful world with its own distinct texture that I just wanted to get lost in as often as I could for long as I could. Over and over, I would happen to be reminded of a song of theirs that I liked, listen to that one song, and then, next thing I knew, they'd be all I listened to for a month. And then I just kind of stopped feeling that way, On paper, I'd still have called them one of my 2 or 3 favorite bands, but that was more a matter of habit than passion. The classic lineup fell apart. Man, Woman, Life, Death, Infinity was, despite its rather grandiose title, their kind of smallest, weakest album since the very early days. And, for the last decade or so, Steve Kilbey has done like 5 albums a year by various projects where somebody else does the music. He recites what often sounds like a first take of a lyric that he wrote in 20 minutes. And of course, he had the pandemic-era cottage industry of doing re-recordings acoustically of whole classic Church albums. And for a long time, I really admired how prolific he was, right? But at some point, it actually became kind of exhausting. And what seemed to be the shambles of the band, plus the glut of only intermittently inspired solo work, plus just, generally years of burnout and immersion in the catalog, kind of cumulatively exhausted me on the whole idea of The Church, and they turned into the most recent in a very long list of things that I liked a lot more passionately when I was 27. Now, I'm not the only one I know to feel this way during this time, although at least in the online Church fan spaces that I see, that tends to be an opinion that's expressed quietly. But the Hypnagogue surprised me by defying all those trends, and I was really amazed and pleased how much I liked it. But because then I was so qualified in my praise, I really need to say that this new album, Eros Zeta Yada Yada, is the first Church or Kilbey-related thing I've heard, maybe in 7 or 8 years, that feels unqualifiedly like it did back in the day, right? Where the presence of their music is warm and calming and unsettling and a little eerie and strange all at once, where fragments of random songs might jump unbidden into one's mind throughout the day and feel like an old friend popping in for a visit. So what is it that's making this work? I mean, to some extent that's always inexplicable, but I can try to point out a few things. There's a subtlety here that the Hypnagogue didn't have. That's an album of big epics and big feelings. This is more subtle, more nuanced. The Hypnagogue is an album of blazing summer and violent winter, and this consistently feels like a very autumn sort of album, right? Something with a sense of quiet dislocation and exhaustion that fits the current sound incredibly well. The opening track, Realm of Minor Angels, captures a sense of melancholy tiredness that's very appropriate to this phase of their career, conveyed both in the lyrics and in the big cinematic guitar hook.
So no more approach in these cards or on the lows. Don't bother crying.
One of the church's trademarks has always been interplay between guitars, not in ways which are particularly technical, but, in which different layers of guitar blend in intuitive and satisfying ways where there's not a clear rhythm or lead. This lineup continues that tradition in ways which work even better here than they did on the Hypnagogue. I count at least 4 layers of acoustic and electric on the song Pleasure, for instance, each doing a different thing which still blends into something coherent and memorable. In my review of the Hypnagogue, I talked about the aging of Kilby's voice, how in the last 10 years or so it's taken on kind of a cracked, brittle quality. I'll admit that that aging actually doesn't bother me here. There's something about the material, maybe the production, how he's using it in a more thoughtful way. I really don't know what it is, but it feels more comfortable than any of his vocal performances in quite some time. Now, the Church have always been good at the endings of albums, and the last 4 songs here are really particularly successful that way. You have Sleeping for Miles, which is really the kind of perfect, quiet, folky, end of the 3rd quarter sort of track.
I've been sleeping for miles. I'm keeping my smile.
Followed by 2 nearly ambient pieces bookending a dark 9-minute epic called A Strange Past. Now, this is already a very strong song in the first half, but it turns into a highlight in their catalog when you throw in this propulsive, swirling instrumental that it builds to in its second half. Interestingly enough, this features Eric Avery of the band Jane's Addiction, one of the very small number of people who've guest musicians who've appeared on a Church album. Now, this isn't a perfect album. It does have maybe 2 or 3 songs that start to feel notably skippable on multiple listens, which, is forgivable or even inevitable, I guess, on a 15-track outtakes album. Sometimes the overtly conceptual material sits oddly. This album still takes place theoretically in the fictional 2054 era world of the rock star Eros Zeta, being, as I understand it, a selection of the music of his band. But it's easy to forget that because Eros Zeta's, lyrical style, worldview, etc., are pretty much identical to that of Steve Kilby and the Church. That makes it odd when he gives the following praise to a lover.
I'll tell you, baby, you're a damn fine woman. I don't care that you wanna kill me. You rile me up, you fire me up. I sing like a choir, like Steve Kilby.
The weird self-referential joke there, which manages to somehow be both self-deprecating and self-aggrandizing, it feels like it belongs in another Steve Kilby project, not so much on an album by the Church. Those are minor gripes, though, right? And the overriding impression here is of a band fully rediscovering itself, and, me as an audience member really fully re-engaging with them in the process. That Kilby's stubborn insistence on keeping this band name alive has resulted in something which is, once again, definitively bigger and more powerful than him or, the sum of its other parts. And I'm quite happy to see it. Thanks for your time. Check out Electric Brain, Electric Shadow through the link in the playlist below or on Bandcamp or your favorite streaming service, and I'll see everyone in a week.